And you're very welcome along to OTB NFL this week. We are going to be joined by Cian and Sam. Sue's going to be picking some picks for us after picking 3 correct picks last week. So, no pressure this week to follow it up with 3 more winners. The trade deadline is in the books. We'll bring you the results and the fixtures a little bit later on. But I'm delighted to say Sam Monson of PFF is here with us as he is every week. Sam, how you doing?
Doing good, Ger. How about you?
Yeah, it was a pretty interesting trade deadline. Some of the stuff that we thought would happen didn't happen. Some of the stuff that we didn't think would happen did happen. I'm always amazed at teams deciding who are still in a competitive form to trade in a good player. I'm thinking specifically of the Green Bay Packers here. So they've got one last half season left of Clinton Dix under his rookie contract, and they're getting a 4th round pick. They're competitive, and they might go deep, and he's a good player. Do you not value the competition this season, especially when you've got Aaron Rodgers? Or what's going on here? What's the thought process behind the GM deciding that he's going to trade him in at this point?
Yeah, particularly when, the way free agency works in the NFL, there's a whole system of compensation picks for guys that depart in free agency. And you potentially could have gotten a 4th round pick in a year's time. If Clinton Dix leaves in this offseason, he could be worth a 4th round pick coming back to the Green Bay Packers as an awarded compensation pick for departed free agents. So you're potentially trading him away at midseason, essentially just to cash that in a year earlier. Now, that may not be the case because if the Packers plan on being big spenders in free agency, obviously it's all about net loss and gain during free agency, not necessarily individuals' loss. So it's not certain they would have gotten that pick, but it's certainly possible that they've traded this guy away essentially to get a pick a year earlier than they would have, and it's a 4th round pick, so it's not like it's a huge thing. That, I think, was definitely the most surprising move of the trade deadline period, because he's a good player. He's one of our top-rated safeties in the league right now. The Packers, as you said, they're in contention still. It's not been the greatest start to a season ever, but the NFC North is a mess. The entire division is separated by 1 game. So they're still firmly in the hunt, and when you look behind them, it's not like they had a whole bunch of guys that have been waiting for playing time, and he's just sort of stopping a young stud from getting on the field. You look at the Packers' safety depth right now, and you think, who's even playing safety for them right now? Are they going to move Tramon Williams, a cornerback, to safety? Are they going to move Josh Jackson, a rookie corner, to safety? Or are they going with these guys that are legitimately buried on the depth chart now that they shipped off Dix?
So should we expect stories in the coming days to raise question marks about his character and how much of a bad influence he was on teammates, that actually it was him who was whispering to Ty Montgomery to take that ball out? Is that the type of stuff, the smear stories that you hear afterwards?
I mean, it's certainly possible. There's always this element of what don't we know going on behind the scenes whenever you see a move that surprises everybody. But, it is also possible that they just decided this is a 4th round pick for a guy we don't value as much as everybody else. We're going to be losing him anyway in a few months' time. Let's cash in while we have the chance. And as much as it's confusing because they don't have an obvious replacement, safety is potentially the least impactful position on defense anyway. It's the position that you can patch over the easiest. It in theory has the least impact on winning and losing games if you can just get a guy in there who's not going to do a terrible job. So it's definitely a surprising move, but not one, I think, that's completely illogical and can only be explained away by things behind the scenes that we're not privy to.
So did the Washington Redskins get a bit of a bargain here, or is he something like in that team? Does it make more sense, the fact that they're at the moment clear leaders of that division?
Well, they have the flip side of that deal. So they've paid the 4th round pick to get the guy in the building, but they're now dealing with a guy who's only got half a year left on his rookie contract. So they either need to extend him with a new contract, which is going to cost a lot of cash money to get done, or they let him walk out the building, and then they potentially get the 4th round pick in the compensation order in a year's time. So it makes all these trades really fascinating in a way they didn't necessarily used to be, because you're not just dealing with what you're giving up and what you're getting in, you're dealing with what that does offset versus the potential compensation draft pick that you would have for losing the guy in free agency. So all these guys getting to the end of their contracts become really fascinating kind of trade topics because of all those moving pieces. But Washington, I think they do get they now have a really impressive looking safety pairing, because Clinton Dix comes in and joins DJ Swearinger, who has weirdly become one of the best safeties in the NFL right now. And I say weirdly because if you watched him play for the Houston Texans a few years ago, you would never believe this guy would become one of the best safeties in the NFL. We used to do these review calls at the end of every week in PFF, and it would be all the senior analysts sitting around and essentially troubleshooting and brainstorming the toughest plays and the biggest screw-ups of the week to try and find out what broke down, where it happened. And every single week there was a collection of Houston Texans coverage busts on the back end, and DJ Swearinger would be at the heart of them somewhere. You know, there'd be one guy doing something when everybody else is doing something else. And you wouldn't believe that guy could go to being one of the best safeties in the game, playing extremely well against the run and the pass. But he has, and he's been playing great this year. Now you get to team him up with Clinton Dix and some pretty good cornerbacks at times in Washington. That defense is kind of sneaky good. So
that's about coaching, or is it about maturity? Is there do we somehow am I in danger of overvaluing the coaching that he's getting at Washington?
Yeah, it's not a Washington specific thing, because he kind of got himself back in shape when he went to Arizona. He was playing terribly with the Texans, always at the heart of busts. He went to Tampa Bay then. He wasn't playing well then, but I didn't notice as many coverage busts, complete breakdowns. Then he went to Arizona and something changed, because in Arizona he was grading extremely well. It almost immediately turned things around, and they just had too much invested in the safety position. They already had Tyrann Mathieu there. They drafted Budda Baker. They just had no room for Swearinger, and they let him go. Then he found his way to Washington, where the same story seems to have continued. So I don't know if it's a specific coaching issue. It's certainly not specific to Washington, but there really was this seminal moment in his career where he went from being a real problem player and a disappointment to a guy who actually is now a very good player.
Howie Roseman obviously has decided that his Super Bowl window is open. I mean, he's completely right about that, obviously. They just won it. And they've decided to trade for a wide receiver who is 30 years of age and who is relatively expensive, but actually seems to be what that offense is missing at the moment. Because the Philadelphia Eagles haven't looked like the Philadelphia Eagles offense from last season. Their defense is still reasonable. Is there room for this one final piece of the jigsaw to suddenly allow us to see a much better picture?
Yeah, I think there's potential there. And again, you have to factor in this 8-game kind of rental system where then they lose him and potentially get a draft pick back. So it minimizes the actual risk of trading for this guy in the first place. He's an interesting player because he can play in the slot and he can play outside. And I think he's good at doing both of them, despite being relatively kind of short of stature for being an outside wide receiver. But the thing that he does is he's an absolute broken tackle machine. He's, I think, been either first or second in broken tackles among wide receivers for several years running at PFF, and that's what he does. He catches the ball, makes guys miss, makes bigger plays than he has any right to. Where it gets interesting is that the Eagles already have Nelson Aguilar in the slot, and he's a pretty good player. So are they going to move Golden Tate to play outside more than he has when he was with the Lions, or is he going to essentially push out Aguilar and marginalize him from the offense? Either way, I think he represents an upgrade, but I think it's a much bigger upgrade if they keep him outside. They find a way to keep Aguilar in the slot where he's at his best, and then you have now 3 dynamic receivers at wide receiver to go along with the tight ends that they have in Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert, and then you've got a real kind of collection of weapons for Carson Wentz to throw to. And
what does trading away somebody like Golden Tate suggest about where the Lions are at this point? Is that a sense that they don't have faith in the team, or that they actually have a young receiver core who they want to get more targets to?
Yeah, it's difficult to phrase it, to position it as a ringing endorsement for their chances this season, but they do have a guy like Kenny Golladay who they can get more targets to with Golden Tate gone. I would expect Marvin Jones and even Theo Riddick out of the backfield gets more targets as well. I think they can pick up the slack that they lost by letting Golden Tate go, but it's tough to kind of position that as a real, ringing endorsement of their chances this season. But again, 8 games from now, they were probably going to have to let him go anyway for this big free agent contract. So they're just cashing in now while they can, and they don't think it's going to make a big enough difference to the offense that it's that there's a big downside to doing it.
The one thing that is noticeable from the teams who aren't great is that their fans are always like, oh, sell the current players and get the draft picks. And I'm always amazed. I kind of wonder who they think is actually going to take the field next season when these draft picks are kids, effectively, coming out of college. Like, no team has ever got great from just one draft class being good. You need a blend of proper vested veterans who understand the ebb and flow of a 16-game regular season.
You do, but if you hit on one draft class, it can completely transform a team and set them on the way to that Super Bowl window. So you think of the Seahawks, who got Russell Wilson, they got Richard Sherman in the same draft. You know, if you get 3 or 4 guys in one draft, you can be set up for an extended run of having a big Super Bowl window open, because the rookie contract is everything. You know, it's not necessarily that you're getting guys that are young and talented. You know, you're not going kind of championship manager on this thing and just going younger and younger every single year. But getting these guys on that rookie contract, which is such a bargain in today's NFL, that's the real key. Particularly, you know, if you get a quarterback and he's on that rookie deal, that opens a window for everybody. So I think teams have opened a window by doing this. But the other reason it's a good thing is the draft is still such a crapshoot that you do need more picks than fewer. You know, the more opportunities you have, the more tickets you buy at the lottery, the more chances there are that you'll actually hit on something. But obviously the flip side to that is when you have all of these picks, most of them probably aren't going to pan out. You know, you've traded away proven commodities to get cheaper, and to get these draft picks, most of whom are going to end up being essentially draft busts.
Yeah, I can't wait to see who the Raiders pick with the 2 picks that they've got for Khalil Mack. And if either of them is anywhere near as good as Khalil Mack, then happy days, you've done okay. But it's very unlikely that anybody that they get is going to be as good as Khalil Mack. I did want to talk about another first-round pick who was traded this week. The Rams picked up Dante Fowler from the Jags. Now, Fowler had a troubled history. It was, I think, the first practice of his first season as a rookie that he did his ACL, so missed that whole season. This year had a big fight with one of his teammates in the off-season, had been banned for a game by the NFL for personal conduct. So clearly has not had the best, and some of it was self-inflicted, some of it wasn't, in Jacksonville. Is there a possibility that he is a proper early first-round talent, and that in Wade Phillips' defense in Los Angeles, he's actually going to be a superstar?
Yeah, I don't know if I would go that far, but I think there is a good chance that this proves to be a good acquisition for them. He's shown this season that in a much more diminished role within that Jaguars defense, he can still get a lot of pressure. He's graded well this season at PFF. He's only got 2 sacks, but I think he has another 15 hurries on top of that, despite only playing 160-something snaps. So he's got pressure this year, and the Rams have no edge rushers whatsoever. You know, their interior is incredible. It's that Aaron Donald, Michael Brockers, and Ndamukong Suh in the middle. So to an extent, they don't really need edge rushers. But now they've gone after a guy that could at least generate a bit of pressure in his own right on the edge, and possibly more importantly, clean up a ton, you know, from all these guys getting pushed up the middle and forcing quarterbacks to go places they don't want to go. Dante Fowler could get a bunch of additional sacks or pressures or all that just by maintaining his spot and being in the right place at the right time. So, yeah, I think by any objective measure, he's been a pretty colossal draft bust. But some of it was injury, some of it was kind of stuff that could be resolved with a change of scenery. But the biggest thing is that Wade Phillips defense, who knows how to unleash these players, and the fact that he's got such a strong group of guys inside him. I think there's a real chance he turns out to be something. Yeah,
which just strengthens the case that the last unbeaten team in football is by far the best team. Like, is it as close as the record says? Are Kansas as close as we think they might be? Or are the Rams very far in front of everybody right now?
I think the Rams are the most complete team in football, and I don't think it's particularly close to the next most complete. Where the Chiefs, I think, are close is that their offense is as devastating, if not more so, than the Rams. And even if their defense isn't as good, offense is everything in today's NFL, and if you can't stop them scoring, it really doesn't matter how bad your defense is. You know, you're at least going to be in every game the same way, and it's just going to come down to what you're able to execute. So, you know, the Rams might be able to hold more teams to a lower point total the other way, and kind of win more games by blowouts, have a higher margin of victory. But if you're not able to stop the Chiefs scoring, you're still not beating them.
Is Todd Gurley the kind of answer to the assumption that you can plug any replacement value running back in and get somebody who's just as good. Because like Le'Veon Bell, it looks like the Steelers are almost as good a team without him. And you kind of think, oh, well, he could do two things, and maybe James Conner can't do quite the same things, and maybe they would be even better without him. But with Gurley, you get the sense that, like, I really would need two extra players on the field, one to be that running back and one to be that receiver.
But if you look at what he's doing and if you look at the holes he's running through, I think it's just another example of the same thing. What running backs can do in today's NFL is add value on top of a platform that's already great. You know, they can stand on the shoulders of giants and do something special, but they can't get there in the first place without that. So if the offensive line with the Rams hadn't improved, it became one of the better, it's a number one ranked offensive line in the NFL right now. It had been one of the worst units in the league a couple of years ago. So if the offensive line hadn't improved, if they hadn't got the quarterback in Jared Goff, if they hadn't got Sean McVay in, who's able to scheme up all these plays and bust these wide open lanes, Todd Gurley would look like he did under Jeff Fisher, which is this struggling running back who's starting to look a bit like Trent Richardson. But when all of that stuff comes together, the running back can provide this extra special value and do all these special things on top of that makes him look like an MVP candidate. I think you're seeing that with Todd Gurley. I think you're seeing that with Kareem Hunt in Kansas City as well. When everything is good, the running back looks amazing. When it isn't, they just don't look the same guy. At
least with those two players in particular, you can send them on a go route and throw the ball down to them, and they're capable with their athleticism of doing remarkable things and catching the ball. And I think that's probably what separates them from any other tier of running backs who are, you know, very, very solid world-class athletes, but just not the absolute special athletes that seem to be a few of at the moment in that elite tier of running backs.
Yeah, I mean, any elite tier of running back right now needs to be a legitimate factor in the passing game. You look at Adrian Peterson in Washington, he's still capable of doing special things on the ground, and the Redskins are proving he's at least capable of catching a simple screen and turning it upfield, but you can't split him out wide and ask him to run a post. It's just, it doesn't happen. Peterson can't do that kind of thing, whereas the very best running backs in the league right now can. They're almost as capable as a wide receiver as they are in the backfield.
Yeah. You mentioned the MVP race. Like, there's always an assumption that it's going to go to the quarterback, and what Mahomes has been doing under the circumstances is ludicrous. Week after week after week, it just gets better and better. His footwork is amazing. He's brilliant on the run. It's a range of different throws. It's got everything you want to see, and it's like he's a child still, basically. And yet there's this sense that Gurley is carrying the team at certain key moments in games when it looks close or when they're down. So if you were to vote right now, where would it go?
I mean, I honestly think Gurley is maybe the fourth most valuable player on the Rams, let alone in the league. I think you've got to go Goff, you've got to maybe even Andrew Whitworth, Aaron Donald. Gurley just isn't in that conversation to me. I hate the MVP award. I think it's a terrible idea. In most other sports, the most valuable player is also just the best player. That's how it works. But in football, the most valuable player is the quarterback, and the most valuable player in the league is the top 25 or so quarterbacks, until you get to a player that's so bad at quarterback it doesn't matter. He's actually a negative. So MVP, it's a silly award for football, for American football. You know, PFF doesn't even do an MVP award. We do this thing called the Stevenson Award, which is our like NFL Heisman, where we just give it to the best player in the league, period. If you're legitimately talking about value, it's got to be one of the quarterbacks, because nobody else moves the needle like that. And I think Mahomes is right up there. Even Jared Goff is right up there. You know, the scheme is doing special things there, but he is adding that value. He's putting those passes in the air that most quarterbacks would not be able to. Those two guys, I think, are the headliner for MVP. If you're talking about the best player in the league, period, it's still Aaron Donald. Like, nobody comes close.
Did he have a slow start of the season? There was some suggestion that he wasn't quite as explosive until 3 or 4 weeks ago, when, I don't know who he wrecked a game against. It might have been the 49ers, which obviously isn't high praise in particular. But did he have a slow start by his own standards?
A little bit, but a lot of that was because he didn't have the sack numbers to begin the year. He was always wrecking teams when it came to total pressures, and it's a better measure of how a guy's actually impacting it, because you're just affecting more plays. The sacks will almost always come if you're getting a sustained amount of pressure, and Donald's been doing that all the way through the season. He is just he's genuinely incredible. We're talking about a Hall of Fame player. We didn't think it was possible to get better than a guy like J.J. Watt, but Donald has been recently. And if anything, he's getting better. This season is better than last season, which is better than the season before. it's ridiculous the trajectory he's on.
Okay, I did want to ask you a little bit about some of the games that are happening this weekend, and the suite of games is pretty good. There's like 3 complete duds, one of which is the Thursday night game, but after that most of the games are between teams with 500 records or slightly better. The Chargers against the Seahawks is a great game. The Packers at the Patriots is also going to be a really good game, but obviously the game of the week is the Rams at the Saints, and there's been some talk that we seem to have lost our Skype connection to Sam there. Okay, we've re-established contact with Sam on the phone this time. Sam, I did want to just ask you one last thing about the Rams at the Saints. The Saints last week against the Vikings, again, separated themselves from the tier below them. They're not quite at the Rams level, it seems, but this is a chance for them to actually prove us wrong and show that they are genuine Super Bowl contenders this year.
Yeah, they're definitely a good team. The Vikings game was interesting because I think Minnesota was well on its way to winning that game, and then the fumble right before the half really changed that game completely from Adam Thielen, who's been fantastic this year. Turned the ball over. The Vikings were on their way down to score before the half. They end up turning it over. It goes back the other way. The Saints score. It completely swung momentum in that game. But the Saints defense is looking better. It struggled to deal with the receivers the Vikings have, but so does everybody. They got a load of pressure on Kirk Cousins and the Vikings offense, so that was a big part of it. And obviously the Saints offense is really formidable. They have one of the best offensive lines in the game right now, the best tackle tandem. So yeah, the Saints, they lost that opening game to Tampa Bay, but since then they've been rolling and they're as good as anybody in the NFC. They'll be a real test for the best teams out there.
Yeah, good stuff. Sam, great to have you with us. Thanks a million.
Anytime, Jared. Take it easy.
That's Sam Monson from PFF there. You obviously recognise his work from Sky on Sunday afternoons and, of course, from Pro Football Focus. You can get him at PFF_Sam. Now, going to run you through last week's results and fixtures on the show, as we always do. We also get the views of Cian Fahey in just a moment. After a decent weekend last week, a pretty interesting week of trades and a week of results. So that was the game we were just talking about there at the bottom. Going from back to front, the Patriots and the Bills. The Patriots this week have been put on notice by Bill Belichick that they need to improve their running game. Josh Gordon started that game late because of tardiness, and still they absolutely pummeled the Bills, who are completely useless at the moment and have one of the worst quarterbacks in the league, and that's saying something. So the Saints beat the Vikings 30-20. There was that game where the Rams could have covered and could have had another touchdown from Todd Gurley, but he stopped on the line and won that 29-27. Ty Montgomery obviously doesn't bring the ball out, and who knows what happens. There would have been 2 minutes of good fun with Aaron Rodgers, but we didn't get that, and Ty Montgomery gets shipped off to the Ravens. The Cardinals beat the 49ers. Again, two of the worst teams in football. The Raiders absolutely pummeled by the Colts, but Derek Carr looked good. Completed passes, found his receivers, was a man, didn't cry. The Panthers beat the Ravens 36-21. Cam Newton is pretty close to his absolutely best form at the moment. The Bears beat the Jets, a routine enough victory for them. The Bengals and the Buccaneers, an absolutely wild game. Fitzmagic is back, and he is the starting quarterback for the Buccaneers, which means the Buccaneers coaching staff is going to get fired. Jameis didn't get traded away. Who knows what the hell is going to happen over the course of the rest of the season. The Seahawks beat the Lions 28-14, and they dealt with them pretty well, so the Seahawks might be real. They do, of course, have institutional knowledge of what it takes to get into the playoffs. They have in Russell Wilson, a quarterback who's able to make something happen out of nothing, and they seem to have some young receivers who are catching jump balls. The Giants made it look close with a garbage time touchdown against the Redskins, but they are rubbish. Eli's washed up. The Steelers beat the Browns and finished the Hugh Jackson era 33-18. The Chiefs beat the Broncos but didn't cover 30-23. The Jags in London, no good. London's team, not great at all. Beaten by the Eagles 24-18. Sue was at that game. We'll talk to her about that a little bit later on. And the Texans, Deshaun Watson is back, baby. 42-23. They pummeled the Dolphins, although Will Fuller did his ACL. And those of us who are Will Fuller owners in fantasy know that is a bit shit, really. Cian Fahey is with us. Cian, how are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. It'd be much better if Will Fuller hadn't done his ACL, but there you go. I'm not going to complain.
I assume you're thinking fantasy purposes rather than the Texans. They did acquire Demaryius Thomas at least.
Yeah, which is, again, haven't talked about this. That's a bit weird. They're playing the Broncos in the next game. The Broncos have read the script. He's going to score 2 touchdowns. He's going to have 150 yards, and he's going to kill them, because that's the way it goes in sports.
And it's also in Denver too, which is a bit of a weird one. Your first game for your new team is in your old team stadium against your old team. That's got to feel a little bit uncomfortable. It reminds me of was it Teddy Sheringham who went to the wrong bench a couple of years ago when he went back to Old Trafford with Tottenham. The move there is an interesting one. Like it's kind of reflected in how much they paid. They gave up a 4th round pick for a 7th round pick. Not a big trade off for a guy who is a known name in Demarius Thomas. And the interesting aspect of this is I don't really think he's a replacement for Will Fuller, because Fuller is this 9-route vertical running receiver who stretches the defense, and that's not who Demarius Thomas is anymore. He's an older, bigger receiver who can still make guys miss and run routes and get open, but he's not going to stretch the field the way Fuller did. He's more of a big slot receiver than an outside vertical threat. So it's going to change the identity of that passing game quite a bit. Yeah,
like how? So all of a sudden, are they throwing jump balls for DeAndre Hopkins and also jump balls for Demarius Thomas? Is this just going to be a jump ball offense for the rest of the season and wild rides ensue?
Well, that's kind of the way you would look at it. Is Demarius is more similar to DeAndre Hopkins than he is to Will Fuller. So the Texans offense has gotten back to what they did previously with Deshaun Watson last year, where you would keep everyone in blocking, you really hard play fake, and you have just 2 receivers releasing downfield. And you could do that because Will Fuller was so fast that he would get downfield so quickly that he was on top of the safety and in behind the cornerback straight away. So the safety would then have to decide, am I going to go down and help on Hopkins, or am I going to stay deep on Fuller? Because Fuller got down there so quickly, that space would be created wide open. And you saw the Hopkins touchdown against the Dolphins. That's exactly what happened, where Hopkins is left wide open in space after running a crossing route, and Fuller has occupied the safety and the cornerback. Hopkins catches the ball turns around, and there's all this space in front of him. He runs downfield for the touchdown. Demarius Thomas, if he runs that exact same route, it takes him a longer time to get further downfield, so it's easier for the coverage to react and to squeeze the space away. So without Fuller, the space isn't going to be there for Hopkins. Hopkins is still going to be productive. He's still going to have big numbers, but the offense as a whole is just a lot easier to defend when you take away that speed element.
So does it become a little bit more of a lottery, and you do actually ask your receivers then to be winners of contested catches at the high point of the ball's flight?
Yeah, there's going to be a lot more pressure on Deshaun Watson to make tighter window throws and to diagnose defense. I suspect they will change their game plan a little bit again. They will go back to that, having Watson in shotgun, spreading it out a little bit more. Something I think he might actually be better suited for. It's not as good for the offense as a whole, but I think it's better suited for him, where he can get the ball out quickly underneath and work the shorter and intermediate levels of the coverage more, and they won't have as many blockers in. I just don't think the offense is set up to do that, and Watson is going to need to grow in his decision making and develop over the early stages of his career, because he's still a very young quarterback, still a very inexperienced quarterback. That offense they were running, it simplifies everything for him and makes it easier for him. Now it's going to be tougher without Fuller.
Yeah, he's also a year and a week out exactly from doing his ACL, and you kind of see that there are certain players who really take their time to come back. Not everybody is Adrian Peterson breaking back from his ACL and having his 2,000-yard season or whatever it was that year.
And it's his second ACL.
Yeah, so obviously it's going to take him a little bit longer, but he looked to be moving with the freedom that he had, that absolutely energised the entire league last year when he was finally brought into the starting lineup by the Texans. So,
you saw it on that the touchdown to his tight end. I can't remember which tight end it was. I think it was Jordan Thomas, where the play was designed to go to the right, and he didn't see an open tight end on the front side of the play, but he had that comfort and agility to turn back and run back to the other side of the field. It only happened because Andre Branch didn't play his assignment and left that side of the field open. But he had that comfort to turn around, extend the play, keep moving, have the eyes up, and then find the open tight end. So physically, I'm not really concerned about him. It's just my concern with him is always the consistency of his accuracy and the consistency of his decision making.
We should talk about the Browns, because I haven't brought that up on the show yet. An entire new era, entire old era is over. It was kind of ludicrous that the Hugh Jackson experiment had lasted so long, particularly when we got to see some of the inner workings on Hard Knocks this year. Two things. I would never agree to have Hard Knocks on. I would find some excuse for it, whatever it has to be. And then the other thing is, why the hell did they keep him?
Well, first thing is, Hard Knocks is not something they had a choice in. They changed that rule 2 years ago. If you don't make the playoffs, you can't refuse it. So if you have to make playoffs in the previous 2 years, so that's why you end up with a team like the Browns, who obviously hasn't made the playoffs. They have no say in whether they get Hard Knocks or not. Why did they keep him? No idea. This is the same dysfunctional franchise. This is Jimmy Haslam working at the top, ironically, who called Michael Kendricks for insider trading when Jimmy Haslam has his own insider trading issues. So you can understand there's not exactly a consistent stream of thought here. But Jimmy Haslam runs his team in such a way that doesn't make any sense. They brought in Sashi Brown to tank so they could get a higher draft picks, stockpile draft picks, lose in the short term to win in the long term, and then they fired Sashi Brown because his team was losing in the short term, even though that's what he was hired to do. So this is the second part of that. Hugh Jackson was kept from that 0-16 team last year. Didn't make any sense. I don't judge a coach on his win-loss record, but when you have a team that's capable of winning 6, 7, 8 games and you win 0, that's a major, major red flag. And that team last year was talented enough. Hugh Jackson has had a weird career because in Cincinnati, he built that Andy Dalton offense phenomenal. In his first year in Cleveland, he got the most out of that team because they did not have any talent. They only won one game, but they were competitive every single week. And then the next year, when he had a lot more talent, when he had Deshaun Kaiser, who was better than what he had the previous year, and he just never set him up for success. That doesn't mean Kaiser was good, but the offense as a whole was better than it was previously, and Kaiser had enough, if he was used properly, to win games with. When they go from competing at 1-5 or 1-15 that season with no talent to having more talent, and then suddenly going 0-16 and not being competitive, there's something just not right there. There's some level of poison there. And the other part of this is Hugh Jackson is, character-wise, he is very, very quick to blame everyone around him. And you've seen that. He's done it publicly this year. Very inconsistent in his public statements. After week 2, he was talking about everyone's on our bandwagon. Then they lose a couple of games. We were ahead of schedule anyway. And it's like, he's just not... It doesn't feel like there's a consistent train of thought or a consistent thought process with him. I think it's going to be difficult for him to get any job again, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, maybe somebody was saying he could actually end up working for the NFL in their league office because people like him. He's quite affable, clearly a solid media performer, and seems to get on well with owners. Seems to be able to convince owners to give him an opportunity. Kind of exactly what you need in the league office, but not what you need from your coach. Are they screwed? Is that whole season a write-off now? Should they just tank for the rest of the year, or what do you try and do?
Well, that's where they were anyway. This team wasn't built to be contending. Once you take Baker Mayfield, you're signing yourself up for a quarterback who has to learn how to play at this level. So that's the way it was with Kaiser. So the way it is at Mayfield. So you're signing yourself up for 4, 5, 6, 7 wins anyway. This is the weird thing about this. You didn't really fire Hugh Jackson because the team was bad this year. You fired him because things were bad last year and the year before, and they're still bad this year. It's a very difficult one to break down in terms of just this season, because if you take that roster and you look at their results and you look at how they've competed, you would say, yeah, the coach is doing a fine job. But when you're the coach talking about, we're taking these big step forwards and you're in the third year of your development, it just wasn't good enough. Yeah, I mean, I think they fired him really because there was so much angst in the building that he couldn't get on with the offensive coordinator who had been hired. It seemed handpicked by the GM. So, and has been fired as well. Yeah, ultimately it was a nest of vipers, so everybody had to go, and he was unable to keep a lid on it. Let's move on, because there's loads of other more interesting, better things to talk about. Let's talk about Jared Goff, right? How much credit does he deserve for what's happening at the moment? How much better as a quarterback is he this year than he was last year, and what's his ceiling? I think the fascinating thing about Jared Goff from the Packers game specifically, so when you took the Vikings game a couple of weeks ago, the Vikings had a defensive line that was capable of getting pressure on him, but they didn't have the coverage in the back end to force him to hold the ball and be able to react to all the play action they used in that game. The Packers defense, not as celebrated as the Vikings, but it's quicker, it's younger, it's got enough pressure up front to create problems for Goff. And you really saw in that game that Goff's eyes were dropping too quickly. He was missing he didn't see open receivers downfield. You wouldn't have seen it on the broadcast, but when you go back to the All-22 that shows you the whole field, he was making bad decisions and he was missing throws that he should have made. He did not have a good game in that Packers game. And that's kind of the thing for me with him is he's very rarely put in positions where he has to manage and move in the pocket. And he was in this game. And it kind of showed you and reminded you that while this guy is putting up phenomenal numbers, while he's a key cog in that offense, he's still not on that level of the other star quarterbacks in the league. He's still someone you can rattle a little bit. But overall, that's very clearly the best team in the league. And when you beat Aaron Rodgers, regardless of how good the rest of his team is, it's a statement win. And I know Todd Gurley didn't score that touchdown at the end, and he could have ran that in. He actually made the right decision on that play to secure the victory. Even though, but the kind of interesting part of that is he would have covered from a gambling point of view. So even when they gave Rodgers 7 or 8 points, and that kind of looked crazy to me because he's never been an underdog for 7 or 8 points, they were right to, because that Rams team was that much better than them. Yeah. No, maybe he gets a backdoor cover and scores a late touchdown with 2 Hail Marys or whatever it is, because he would have a couple of minutes left, or a minute left, whatever it was. Long enough. Just one thing about Goff not being that good.
Does it matter when the rest of your team is so good and you're able to invest all the money that you've invested in Aaron Donald and Ndamukong Suh and now Dante Fowler?
Hey, just go back to last year's Super Bowl. We talked about it there. Nick Foles won the Super Bowl without being that good, and you saw this year the kind of regression of it came back. I think the thing about having a really good quarterback is your margin for error is a little bit bigger. So you need that quarterback to stay hot during that 3 or 4 game stretch in the playoffs, which is what Foles managed to do. Well, actually not really, because that Falcons game with Foles was really bad. They just managed to pull that out. But he managed to stay hot for that couple of games at the very end of the season. You're more likely to have a guy like that play better. And no, I'm not saying Goff is Foles. Goff is, like, to me, a 13th, 14th, 15th best quarterback in the league, something like that, which is fine. He's good enough for them to be confident about winning a Super Bowl. I just hesitate people who talk about him as a top 5 quarterback.
Okay, somebody who is a top 5 quarterback at the moment is Patrick Mahomes, right? He's the real deal.
This guy, like, so if you go back to Texas Tech with him and his college tape, it's just terrible. He looked like an absolute mess, and his footwork was all over the place. He would throw the ball completely unbalanced. But he was drafted in the first round because, one, he had phenomenal arm strength, which is normally a red flag because you don't want to draft a guy just for his arm strength. Look at Josh Allen and all that mess of it is. But he was also brilliant on the whiteboard. So the whiteboard is behind the scenes, diagnosing plays, telling you where to go with the ball, knowing how to react to different defenses. Something that quarterbacks do, but don't generally translate it to the field because it's obviously a very different thing to do it on the field than doing it on the sideline. But Andy Reid took those elements, drafted him, sat him down for a year and said, I'm going to fix all your footwork issues. I'm going to make you more comfortable in what you're doing. And you're going to come out the other side of this as one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And that's exactly what he's been. You've seen a little bit more cracks. He's thrown a few more interceptions over recent weeks. But the subtlety of the things he's doing in the pocket, the decisions he's making, his ability to play against pressure. One of the key things with Goff last week was when the Packers got pressure on him in his face, his lower body, he would move his legs backwards, so he was protecting himself from the hit. And what that meant was the ball would come out, it would float and go high and go off target. With Mahomes, that doesn't happen. He stands in, he takes massive hits, and he delivers the ball, and he delivers it accurately. So that's a key difference between the Chiefs and the Rams. And I'm kind of moving to that point of the year where I'm looking at who's going to meet who in the playoffs or in the Super Bowl, and like that would kind of be the ideal Super Bowl game right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it would be incredibly exciting, and you can see the over starting at like 150. But why don't more people do what Andy Reid did? Why don't they take quarterbacks and give them a year or 2 years behind their existing veteran quarterbacks? Like, there's a model there. It seems to clearly work.
I don't know if it works or not. It works in specific examples. It works with Patrick Mahomes because his footwork is something you can work on. Take a year, get your muscle memory and get that working. It doesn't always work with everything else. Everyone else is developing quarterback for different reasons. Andy Reid had the benefit of knowing his job was safe, knowing that he had Alex Smith to start, knowing that they didn't have major needs to rebuild the whole roster. But that's kind of speaking specifically. If we want to talk about this as a cultural aspect of football, it's something they used to do, and it's just something they don't do anymore. Head coaches get fired after 2 and 3 years now, so they all want to rush their quarterback onto the field. And another part is, when you take a quarterback high in the first round, everyone wants to see him play. Everyone wants him on the field. So you have Blake Bortles, for example. Even though Blake Bortles isn't good, when Blake Bortles was drafted initially, Jags said straight away, no, he's not going to play at all as a rookie. He's not going to throw a single pass as a rookie. 4 games into the season, Blake was their starting quarterback because they lost a couple of games. They were sick of watching Chad Henne, and the fans were like, hey, get him in. And the coaching staff was like, let's get him in because we need a spark. We need to win right now. So Andy Reid had that patience. He was in a position to have that patience. More coaches, more teams should do it. I kind of understand why they don't. Yeah,
and yet, like, you can see that Josh Allen, Josh Rosen, they definitely would have benefited from longer on the bench before they were eventually thrown in.
Yeah, and both of those teams deserve a lot of criticism. Both of those teams, well, I don't know about the Cardinals, but the Bills for sure are a dysfunctional franchise right now because they've so mismanaged their quarterback completely. But both of those teams also had that plan in place. You had Nathan Peterman, you even had AJ McCarron before Nathan Peterman, but they traded him at the end of training camp. They should have kept him, obviously.
Yeah.
But you had him in Buffalo, and you had Sam Bradford, who cost you a lot of money in Arizona. So wasn't working, but your plan wasn't to win right now. Your plan was to develop this quarterback and rebuild your team, and you knew you were rebuilding your team, and that's just bad management and dysfunction and pressure of we need to win right now.
Let's talk about the Patriots in Green Bay. That's the final thing I want to talk to you about. What do you think is going to happen here? Because it's getting to the point of the season where Green Bay, okay, great, they looked brilliant for large stretches. They put it up to the Rams in a way that teams haven't been able to do it. They look like they've got a lot of pieces all over the field. They also had a brain dead running back take the ball out stupidly in the last second and fumble it, and who now plays for the Ravens. So what's the truth about them, and is this a must-win game for them if they're actually going to survive?
It probably is a must-win game for them because they've had so much struggle so far this year. The thing for me that's kind of interesting about this game is you've got Tom Brady and you've got Aaron Rodgers, and the game is going to be framed like a boxing match, greatest of all time against greatest of all time. And when you put these two teams up against each other, it feels like Rodgers is in the ring carrying his trainer, whereas Brady doesn't have to do anything. He's got like probably metal in his gloves or something, because the matchup is just so lopsided. And this game is the perfect game to point to coaching, because Bill Belichick, greatest coach of all time, Mike McCarthy does not seem to have any clue what he's doing. And as that Ty Montgomery thing highlighted, he does not necessarily have that much respect from all of his players at all times. And there's a reason for that. Rodgers has criticised him earlier this year. The lack of creativity on offense, the lack of alleviating pressure on Rodgers, setting Rodgers up for success is a major concern. Rodgers is going to play well, and he's going to play to that level that he always plays to. Brady, on the other hand, has not played that well over the last two games. He was pretty bad in Chicago, and in that Bills game on Monday night, they still won the game, obviously, but they sealed it with a pick six, and it was close for most of the game with him missing some key throws. So you've got a kind of Rodgers-Brady clash coming here, where Brady is a little bit, I'm not saying long-term, I'm just saying short-term form right now, is a little bit on the downturn. Rodgers is kind of steady in where he is, and it's probably going to be decided by everyone else on the field except for the two guys we spend all week talking about.
Yeah. I mean, Brady long-term, short-term, long-term on the slide?
I mean, with him right now, everything is kind of short-term, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you're 41, there's no real long-term idea. But he's on the slide for... it's really just a simple matter of him missing throws. So that could very easily change. You know, it's not like he's suddenly collapsing on himself in the pocket. It's not like he's making awful decisions. Like, he's not like throwing 3 or 4 interceptions in each game. It's that he's got open receivers and he's missed them. This is something that I would wait for probably a month. If he keeps doing this for another 2 weeks, I'll be like, whoa, this is something we need to start talking about. But right now, it's just something to keep an eye on, because with that team as well, I can talk up the coaching, I can talk up Josh Gordon, been phenomenal for them so far. Cordell Patterson is now playing running back. That might work, I guess. But I can talk about the rest of the team, it's Brady that's kind of going to matter as long as we go, especially when that defense isn't that great.
Yeah. All right. Cian, enjoy the weekend's football. Thanks a million.
Thanks, man.
Cian Fahey there with us, previewing the game. Sue is here, fresh off her 3-pick weekend last weekend.
Yeah, pretty happy about that.
And a trip to Wembley.
Yeah.
Which ruined the football on Monday night, Sue.
Why?
Because the Markings were still on the pitch on Monday night.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, the other football. Yeah, the pitch looked dreadful, actually, didn't it? It was really bad. It looked dreadful at the game, though, to be fair.
Shut up about the pitch. It was grand. Get on with it.
No. It looked pretty bad, to be fair. Yeah, it was kind of... Do you know what? It's always a really weird experience in London, because like, I've been to a couple of NFL games in the States and they just turn out for their teams. And then when you go to London, it's like this celebration of football where everyone goes out and wears their jerseys and who the sport.
It's a bit weird.
It's weird, but it's kind of nice. And you end up just rooting for a team anyway. So we sat down, we were like, okay, the people we sit down beside, we're just going to root for that team. And we were sitting beside these 2 little old ladies from Philly.
All right.
Oh my God, your one that was sitting beside me knew every single player on the team. Everything that was going to happen, she could predict it before it was happening. She was so into it. She was giving out to everyone around them. It was like talking. It was amazing. It was brilliant. But the Eagles, Carson Wentz is actually a lovely player to watch. He's very calm, and he was right in front of us for that interception when it all went drastically wrong.
He's so big.
He's so tall. You can really see it from where we were as well.
I didn't kind of have that concept of him being 6'5", Nick Foles is 6'6".
Yeah.
And you're like, holy shit, they are big human beings, even on a football pitch where, like, most of the people are also pretty big.
Yeah,
it was like,
right. Especially because we were actually right behind the end zone, and you could see how tall he was compared to the rest of his defensive line. It was kind of amazing.
So I didn't watch that much of the game or see what was happening. Did they hammer them? Was it close?
It was 24-18, but like, it's a Jags home game, which is kind of unfair on the Jags, I think. But they never really looked like they were going to put up anything to them. Like, it was... Their defence wasn't that great. Like, the Eagles looked like they were coasting it for most of it. I thought Wentz was brilliant. It just seemed like a very easy game for them, and they kind of were treating it like it was.
Yeah.
I didn't think Bortles was that great either.
Well, he's shit, so
I know.
Fair enough.
He lost me a couple of bets. He was good temporarily.
Last week.
Yes.
You didn't, did you?
No.
Okay, that's fair enough.
I bet on Luck, actually. Luck was the chance I took, bet. And I kind of thought he would. So it was the Colts, the Steelers and the Redskins last week.
So the Steelers annihilated the Browns.
Yes.
The Colts beat the Detroit Lions.
The Raiders. 42-28, I think, was the final score. Yeah, and I can't remember it was the Redskins and the Giants, but the Redskins being pretty easy.
The Giants scored. It was a point and a half, but the Giants made it a one-score game with a touchdown in stoppage time. It made no difference.
Yeah.
It wasn't close.
Yeah. Oh, wasn't it? I missed the end of it.
Yeah, no, they hammered them. No, it was a good pick.
Surprisingly good pick. So this week, I'm over them because they're actually pretty tough. But the one that I would take clear of the gap is the Titans at Cowboys. They're plus 6.5. I don't think the Cowboys are going to win that at minus 6.5. I think the Titans are okay. I think they're both about the same ability level.
It's hard to know. The Titans obviously got blown out. Didn't score a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Got shut out. Who beat them? What was that game? Oh, the Ravens.
Yeah, and they were terrible in the first game of the season. Like, I don't know. I think the Cowboys aren't that great. And Dak Prescott hasn't had the greatest time. So it's plus 6.5. They're on the road. The other one that I was going to take was the Vikings. And I know the Vikings lost last week, but they're minus 5 at home to the Lions. The Lions can be just wildly unpredictable. You never really know what's going to happen with them. But I think the Vikings will correct some of the mistakes. And you have to remember the Saints are actually a really, really good team at the moment. So, and the Saints had a bit of an agenda after last year.
That line's moved. It's now 4.5.
Yeah.
The Lions plus 4.5. So money's coming for the Vikings plus 4.5. No.
So I had the Vikings are minus 5.
Yeah, so they're minus 4.5 now.
Yeah.
So money is not coming for them. Money is coming for the Lions at that point, at that price. So you think minus 5?
I think that, yeah. I'd still take them at minus 4.5, yeah. The other one I was looking at was the Chiefs at the Browns. It was minus 8. I don't know what it's at now. I mean, I know they're on the road, but the Browns are just... There's a massive mess at the moment.
Yeah.
You have a new coach. Mayfield looked like he was about to cry in the sideline last week. I just think it's going drastically wrong for them. And
8.5 points.
It's kind of sad because I kind of like their defence, and I think if they got it together, they probably could be reasonable.
Yeah.
But they're and Mayfield, no protection at all in the pocket all last weekend, and you could see him. He was doing the hard work. I think they have it if they put it together, but I don't think they beat the Steelers. I really don't think so.
The Chiefs.
Oh, the Chiefs, sorry.
8.5 points.
Yes. I don't think so. Not after last week.
Big old spread.
It's a massive spread on the road, which isn't good to bet on. Can I tell you one more, though?
Yeah.
That I think the Steelers are on the road to the Ravens. They're a plus 3. They did lose to them, but I would think with the Ravens over the last couple of weeks haven't been as good as I thought they were going to be. Their defence is good, though, but I think the Steelers will get them.
Okay, so you're picking 4.
I would, yeah.
Just pick the Steelers plus 3.
I'm hedging my bet.
Chiefs minus 8.5.
Yeah.
The
Titans plus 6.5.
And the Vikings minus 4.5.
Yeah.
All right. Good stuff, Steve. Thanks very much. That is your 4 winning bets. You can complain at I'll See You.
Yeah. Don't complain.
On Twitter.
I won money last week.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
The treble would have given you 7 to 1, so
yeah.
Not bad.
That's pretty good.
It's fucking great.
Come on. You didn't even listen to me. You were giving out to me afterwards.
Great. I think if you listen back to the tape, you'll find that wasn't the case. Right.
Money on it though.
That is our lot this week. We will be back. We're on hiatus next week for a week because we're at the Web Summit and it's too tricky to coordinate everybody's diaries all around the world. Cork, Lisbon and Cincinnati, not the easiest places to tie in at the same time. So we're taking a week's break, but we'll be back in 2 weeks' time. So whatever happens in the meantime, enjoy. Good luck.